Do you get the feeling we're being watched? Oh shit. Snowden tells the story of Edward Snowden. He was a computer professional. He worked for the CIA, the NSA. He leaked a whole bunch of classified information from the NSA to The Guardian in 2013, blowing the lid off the water on a bunch of cyber snooping that not even the Congress knew about. This movie is directed by Oliver Stone, who's a really big name in Hollywood, but he's honestly a director I've never been that big of a fan of. I feel like a lot of his movies are really long and drawn out, or they kind of lose my interest by the end of the movie. And to be honest with you, this movie is no exception to that. I'll start off by speaking the praises of this movie because there are some really good things in this. You got the main character of Edward Snowden portrayed by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He does really good in this. He does good in pretty much everything I see him in. He's one of my favorite actors. I hope he starts to do more things like this. You got Shailene Woodley playing his girlfriend. She does very well. They have really good chemistry, and being that their relationship is kind of like the core of the story, that chemistry is very, very important, and they do pull it off pretty well. You also have some smaller roles and, glorified cameos really by some actors you'll recognize. You got Nicolas Cage who shows up. You got Timothy Olyphant in a really small role. You got Rhys Ifans who shows up. He's got kind of the meteor role of those three, as somewhat like of a mentor to Edward Snowden. They all do really well. To be honest, the beginning of this movie and throughout probably the last 20 minutes, it is a really tense movie. It is very intriguing, and there's a lot of, spy, espionage flavor in there. But what the problem is with this movie is the length of this movie and just how much Oliver Stone decides to just take you beat through beat for every single event in this guy's life that really doesn't have any relevance to the main plot or the main point of this story. His time in the CIA, his time in the NSA, where he starts to see some of the espionage going on, some of the cyber snooping, where you could look onto this little search engine, you could look up anybody, you can go through their cameras on their computers and their cell phones, you can find any information you want without anybody's permission. And they really should have focused on that and trimmed a lot of the fat of this movie, because they go through these every single position that this guy holds in the CIA and the NSA. They go through why he goes to that job, why he quits that job, or why he's fired to that job, how he likes it, how he doesn't like it. They have a little small stint where he goes through his problems with epilepsy, which by the end of the movie has no relevance. Spots in there with some issues between him and Shailene Woodley, which is important if you're going to focus on the romantic side of it, but they focus on that and then they get away from it, and they focus on it and then they get away from it. It didn't feel like they really committed to it. By probably the hour and a half mark, this movie felt like it had been on for like 3 hours, and I was just sitting there going, okay, can we go? Please get to the bottom of this movie. The other thing that I didn't really appreciate with the way that Oliver Stone directed this as well is that, he's one of those directors that's very firm in his beliefs, political and otherwise, and whenever you're dealing with a story of this nature or a character or a real life person as controversial as Edward Snowden, I really appreciate a movie or a form of storytelling that's much more kind of open to your interpretation. You present all the facts and they kind of let the viewer walk away with his or her opinions on it. Was they for Edward Snowden? Were they against Edward Snowden? And this movie doesn't do that. This movie is 110% for Edward Snowden. Oliver Stone is basically telling you, Edward Snowden's a hero. Edward Snowden was right. You need to follow Edward Snowden. We need to get Edward Snowden back into the U.S. You should be on Edward Snowden's side. And my personal thoughts on Edward Snowden is irrelevant to all this, but I appreciate it much more whenever I can make up my own mind in a movie. I don't like it when a director tells me how I should be feeling and how I should be thinking and how I should be looking at this person of huge controversy. Another thing that bothered me too, which bothers me with a lot of movies like this, where you have a director that has a very firm stance on a character and he wants to really shove that down your throat. They portray Edward Snowden like the biggest Boy Scout in the world in this movie. I've never met the guy personally, so maybe he is that good of a guy, maybe he is that nice, maybe he is that responsible, that much of a patriot, but in 2 hours and 15 minutes you're sitting there and this guy never does anything wrong. He never has a bad intention, he never really does anything wrong, his morals are crystal clear, his patriotism is off the walls. This guy just bleeds red, white, and blue. And whether or not that's a fact or not, it's just a little bit hard to believe for a lot of people. And I feel like Oliver Stone kind of really gets in his own way with trying to portray him as being a hero by just really shoving it down your throat how good of a guy this is. You know, in the story of Edward Snowden, I mean, this time whenever he knows about all this cyber snooping and all this, you know, really morally wrong things that the government is doing, it spans such a huge time span. It's just over many years that he's in the NSA and the CIA. I found myself wondering, okay, at what point is this going to be morally wrong for him? At what point is this going to be too much and he's going to stand up and actually release these documents from the NSA? What is the tipping point for Edward Snowden? Turns out it's whenever somebody mentions his girlfriend. He's having a conversation with Risa Fonce. He makes a haphazard comment about maybe seeing something that his girlfriend did. And after that, he's like, oh, hell no. Leak, 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 leak. Something that threw me off at the end of this movie too, which really didn't bother me at all during the course of the movie, is Joseph Gordon-Levitt's choice of voice in this movie. You know, he talked, my name is Edward Joseph Snowden, and he talks like this through the movie. And it takes you a few minutes to get used to it, but then you're on board with it, because you know sometimes actors have to adapt their speaking to portray a character. But, you know, small spoiler, the very end of this movie, it ends with Joseph Gordon-Levitt delivering a monologue, and then it switches over to the real Edward Snowden to finish this monologue. And the real Edward Snowden doesn't talk like that. So it was kind of weird to me. I don't know if that was Oliver Stone's choice or if that was Joseph Gordon-Levitt's choice, but by the end of the movie, after I saw that final scene, I was like, why did you choose to do that voice? In the end, guys, Snowden's a really important movie. It's a story that everybody should be aware of if you're not. I mean, most people have heard of Edward Snowden, but you might not know the whole story. It's a movie that I think a lot of people will enjoy if you're really into espionage and kind of spy thriller type movies. Just kind of take the thriller side of it with a grain of salt. The problem with it is, like a lot of Oliver Stone's movie, the runtime and his vision and his direction really gets in the way of it all. You have a really tight core story and he decides to kind of stretch it and, you know, pad it out with all these facts that are kind of irrelevant to the main plot. So by the end of it, a 2-hour and 15-minute movie feels more like a 4-hour movie. So like I said, a really important, relevant movie, really good performances throughout, some intrigue, some suspense here and there, but by the end, it's a movie that you're probably only going to watch once and you're not really going to revisit. So when you want to check out Snowden, check it out on Netflix. So what did you guys think of Snowden? Put your thoughts on the film in the comment section below. Please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button. That way you get to come back and see me next time. But if that's not soon enough to see some more of my videos, you can check out a few more by clicking right over here.